I understand there's 12 principles of animation according to Disney that you apply to puppeteering. Number 1 is squash and stretch.
Squash and stretch, yeah. This, okay, so it's a Disney animation principle, right? And one of the 12. But we embraced this in the real world puppetry too, and in particularly squash and stretch for the Slimer ghost on Ghostbusters. And by the way, his real name is Onion Head. We wanted the Slimer ghost to be able to stretch and squash, right, and keep his volume. And I actually came up with this idea. I'm really glad that I did. This is one of those moments. We're down in Marina del Rey. Here's our monster shop. Across the street is Beacon Storage. And at Beacon Storage, there's these big crate boxes, and they have that wire bandit material holding them together. And I thought, we could use that wire bandit material for dress hoops. And we made dress hoops in the Slimer ghost with bungee cord. That way, it wasn't a big fiberglass shell. It was these dress hoops attached to his rubber skin with bungee cords, and that his whole body could like bounce and squash and stretch. But it wouldn't lose its volume. It would keep its volume. And so that was squash and stretch for Slimer Ghost. Okay, so.
And number 2 is anticipation.
Anticipation, yeah. So anticipation is like like my favorite example. When I discovered this a long time ago, I was watching this Disney movie called The Rescuers Down Under. Okay, in the very beginning of the movie, it happens in Australia. In the beginning of the movie, there's this blade of grass, and there's a dragonfly on it. And then the dragonfly takes off and flies down and flies through canyons and stuff as you follow it, right? And so I decided I want to recreate that scene. I want to make the dragonfly fly. So I looked at the shot and I just made this dragonfly take off, right? And then it didn't look right to me. And so then I went to the Disney movie and I did it frame by frame. And the dragonfly is sitting there, but before he takes off, he crouches and does this little anticipation thing. So he goes, eh, and then he flies. And so he has this little counter on it, like, and off he goes. And that's what mine was missing. It was missing the anticipation of the flight. Like, I can fly. You don't just go here and you go fly. You go like, okay, let's fly, and anticipation.
Great. Number 3 is staging.
Staging, yeah. That is, I think staging goes back to Mickey Mouse and the Steamboat Willie days, because it's more involved than this, but one of the problems with Mickey Mouse is that he has these 2 round ears. But notice, like in the early Mickey Mouse cartoons, when he turns his head, the ears stay the same, right? They don't turn into little slivers or anything. They actually just stay there. And that's partially what I think was the inspiration for staging. And that is your characters need to be in a position where they are wow, it's tough to describe without going to the drawing board, but they need to be in a place where they look right to the audience and they're engaging to the audience, and like for instance, like if you had this like a bad guy character and he was tormenting the good character, you wouldn't want to stage a shot where the good character looked like they were looming over the bad guy character, unless it's the very end and the good guys, the bad guys getting their comeuppance. You mostly want to maintain like a staging that makes it appear that the bad guy is looming and dominating over the good person, and that's mostly has to do with character position and the camera staging, or where the camera angles are. And so that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So.
Number 4, straight ahead action and pose to pose.
Right. So that becomes like that's basically comes under the discretion of the way an animator wants to work personally. But a pose to pose action animated would be like, let's say like I have a shot that's 42 frames long, and they start here and they end here. And so what I will do, in my first frame, I'll pose them here, and then I'll go to my very last frame and I'll pose them all the way over here. And then he'll slide in between and forth, but then I will set the in-betweens. And so he'll go from one pose to the other pose. But I will set up those poses first. Let's say like he has like 3 poses in that shot. So I'll make the first pose, middle pose, and then I'll work the way how they go from pose to pose. Now, if it were straightforward animation, I would just start at that first frame and I would just animate straightforward the whole time till I get to the second pose. And then I would animate from there to the third pose and to the fourth pose. And I would never see the whole thing overall. I would just work straightforward. And I am a person who likes to work pose to pose. I like to have my beginning and my end camera movement, and then I like to frame my action for my characters within that. And then if my camera can't accomplish that movement, then I will go back and readjust the camera. And it kind of becomes this dance. Like you set up your camera and your base action, then the animators, they go and they animate it, and then their animation may fall outside the camera for some reason. So then the camera comes back and we reanimate the camera. And we just do this dance back and forth until we get this happy place that works for everybody and that looks good for everybody. So.
Number 5, follow through and overlapping action.
Follow through and overlapping action. So, like the classic example of follow through and overlapping action. Imagine like if you're walking, and like. So if you were just to walk and your arms are moving like this, right? But in reality, there's a little bit of like when our hands come down, our hands kind of like do this, right? The hand kind of like follows our arms a little bit. I'm exaggerating here, but that's follow through and overlapping. So it's like as my arm is coming through, this hand is being dragged by gravity. So instead of going like this, I'm doing whoosh. And so it's these 2 independent actions that are overlapping each other, but also following through with each other. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. I'm trying to picture sort of a puppet walking, and I guess you could do it where it would be more robotic, but that wouldn't look as real. So then if it's overlapping, it's almost like a flying.
Maybe this will help.
bird-like.
The Muppet technique for puppeteering. Okay.
Okay.
So typically when an animal or character turns their head, there's a lot of things that happen, but there's usually we're not a robot when we turn our head unless we're Michael Myers from the Halloween movies. Usually like we don't go. A lot of the times we have, which is you're going to get to in a minute, you're going to have arc of motion that's going to come up. And so instead of like going like that, I might dip my head down, or I might do a little dip before I see, or I might even go over. Most people and animals, they will dip down a little bit to come over and like into another view. Muppets do head pops. So when a Muppet turns, here comes your Muppet. Hey everybody, and now he's going to turn. He doesn't go like that. He goes like this, the Muppet turn, and that becomes.
So then that would be follow through and overlapping action?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
and that's the Muppet sort of the.
Yeah, so the Muppet like and their overlapping action for turning, instead of turning, it's this head pop. And then also an overlapping action for Muppets is Muppets have to breathe. So before a Muppet talks, he has to take a breath. So it's like. So, hey everybody, it's me. Okay. So they constantly have to put breathing into the Muppets, and that's basically an overlapping action from the rest of their puppeteering is the breathing part. So. And
so then is that leading into the ease in and ease out?
Sorta. Ease in and ease out is basically we don't like if we're moving our arms, they just before it gets to the end, your arm slows down a little bit, and then it comes to a stop, and then it doesn't just shoot into that thing. It slowly goes and it gets into its full arc of motion, and then it slows out again, and so or eases out, right? So if you just do something like it's going to be very mechanic, but if you slow into it, then fasten and slow out, it becomes more organic and more natural. So it's like instead of it's like woof. I don't know if that's going to help you or not.
Yeah, no, it does, unless it was a martial arts scene or something. Then maybe you would want that.
Did you know when they filmed the Green Hornet television show in the '60s with and Cato was played by Bruce Lee? they had to tell Bruce Lee to slow down his moves because the cameras were not fast enough back then to catch the moves. They were just blurs.
Wow.
The 1960s Green Hornet television show with Bruce Lee.
That's fascinating.
Anyway, so
but with puppets.
tangent trivia.
No, I love it. It's great. You could have your own trivia show. That would be good. The number 7 is arc, which you commented on.
Yeah. So it's better for things to work in it. Most things, like, because things are attached or hinged to a body or something like that, they're like, it's better, like, they follow this arc, right? So it's this arc. And even like if I'm throwing something, even that, I don't normally throw something straight. I'm going to put a little bit of an arc of motion in there. And that becomes really important because if you're just moving things straight, it's going to look very robotic and inorganic. And so you need to have that arc of motion in there. And for me, when it was puppeteering, it was very important in terms of, like, for head turns. I would never, like, unless it was a Terminator robot, I would never just like do this. I would always like dip down and look up again. And also in referring back to overlapping action, a lot of, like, the eyes lead the action. So if I'm here and I'm going to look at you, I'm looking at you first, and then my face is turning to catch up with you. Now, if I'm going to go too far, a lot of times I blink, and that's like a new camera setup, right? So, like, I'm looking here, and as I turn my head over here, I will unconsciously blink, and then now you're my new camera setup. And we do this subconsciously all the time in real life. Like, let's say you're going to go meet Dave at a bar, right? And you walk into the bar. There's a big crowd scene, and your eyes, the first thing it is, you see the entire bar, right? But then you see Dave at the counter, and he's waiting for you. Now your camera changes. You went from a wide shot to a telephoto shot. And when you go back in your memory, all you're going to remember is, like, you saw that wide shot, but then you saw Dave, and you focused on Dave, and that was your whole focus. And that's your body camera doing it, and that all works into the way we animate and with the overlapping action and the stuff like that as well. Kind of ties into that.
Yeah, and then I saw nothing else, just Dave.
Right?
And then
it's really great because you can, filmmaking wise, we can really play with that. You can go into, like, temporal stuff and mess with time and stuff like that.
Sure, and then, like, my focus is just like the bar doesn't exist or whatever the scene is.
And you know what? Like, a really great example of that, the bar scene in Terminator, when Lyndon Hamilton's sitting in the bar and Michael Biehn is sitting at the bar over here, and then Arnold comes in, and everything's done in, like, these long shots, and you see these shots, like, you see Linda in the front, but there's these people passing in front of her, and it's like your eyes blinking. And when people walking past her, James Cameron used those to cut, and there's this hard throbbing music through the whole thing. But then when all of a sudden, when the Terminator comes out and everything goes into slow motion, the music goes away and turns into this long weird blur thing. And time changes, and it's a really cool effect, and he nailed it like that. So okay,
sure,
sorry.
And well, timing is coming up, but secondary action.
Secondary actions, yeah. So that's kind of like, wow, how do you explain a secondary action? Let's say, for instance, like I have a Santa's sleigh, and it's flying through the air, right? But on the end of Santa's sleigh, I have tassels, and those tassels are swinging back and forth because of the movement of the sleigh. And that's basically a secondary action from that sleigh in the most primitive form. It gets way more involved with that, but I don't know that I could explain it any better than that.
Sure, but that gives it sort of life and motion, having that little
it just
extra detail.
keeps things alive, yeah.
And then timing.
Timing is key.
Timing is key.
And that's really hard. And so timing, obviously, we need to look at everyday things like how many frames does it take to go and grab a cup, and then how many frames do we hold that cup before we bring it back to take a drink. So figuring out that timing is pretty crucial. And when we first started in CG, we had all of these 2D animators and stuff, right? And they were really good with timing, but then we discovered a gold mine of 3D timing specialists, stop motion people. They were geniuses when it came to timing and stuff, because they were doing it in 3D, and if you screwed up, you had to start over. And so if you look at our dinosaur movie, where we were pioneering 3D stuff on Disney, you'll know most of the animator crew came from movies like Nightmare Before Christmas and James and the Giant Peach. They were all stop motion animators that we recruited, and we trained them in CG, but they already had the timing down from the stop motion world. And so, and I think that was one of the interesting things that it's semi-related, but not quite, that a stop motion person taught me, was that it's great to have failures doing things, like in terms of like let's say I'm going to open a door, and I could just go and I could grab that doorknob and open the door. But what if I miss the door? Because it happens, right? Maybe I go and I go, oops, missed the door, now I'll go grab there. Putting in those little human failures, like those little bits and pieces where we don't quite get it right, but we have to do it, that makes it more organic and more believable and more human. And I think it's really good. It's like if I'm opening something and something falls on the counter and I have to pick it up, that's great. That's adding a little bit of a secondary action as well. So
okay, so don't make your character, your puppet, too perfect.
Don't make them flawless. Yeah, keep them. Yeah.
Exaggeration.
Exaggeration. Yeah, that was something that really came important when I was wearing monster makeup appliances. Exaggeration became very important. But in terms of animation and like in Disney, they teach you to, if you're going to smile, here's a smile, right? But let's do the biggest smile you can possibly get. And they said it's better to exaggerate a character and then dial him back in than just trying to keep pushing him out until you never know. It's better to take him way too far and then dial it back in. So over exaggeration is great, but it also it helps project our intentions and tell our story over exaggerations. Like if someone's like but if that guy in the animation, he gets this big evil smile, and then he kind of overdoes it, now you know his emotions and you know his intent, and that's really important in an animated film. At Disney, they say you should be able to take any single frame of that film and see what the emotion is in that film. And they do that kind of as a test. They will go in and they will spot check. It says, do I have emotion in this shot? What is this emotion? What is it saying? And if it's not projecting the right emotion, they will go and they'll rework it so that it is. So that's kind of fun that way. So.
Solid drawing.
Solid drawing, yeah. That would be that's just good. That's good drawing technique and drawings that you might like. It's hard to go in, like there's things called line weights and stuff like that. Like if you're looking at a line like this. Like let's say this is a person's body profile and this is their chest and it goes down to their stomach like that. And you'll notice that like the line is thinner up here and it's thicker down here. And because what they're doing is they're trying to suggest shadow under the stomach with that line thickness. And so solid drawing comes into like being able to command that stuff and being able to create a good looking character, although that's going to go into the 12 principles, so I shouldn't really go there. It's just solid drawing that shows the intent of your characters. Like for instance, if you're showing a character, like there's another Mickey Mouse problem in Steamboat Willie. Like if his arms crossed over, basically he had a short arm because it was just black on black. So he kind of had like this little arm that stuck out of his body and he had an arm here. So they always had to keep all the arms at the side, kind of like the head ears always had to be stayed. So they always had to stick to a certain amount of rules for the solid drawing in order to make it look And a lot of that was like crossing over the body like that became like you had to come up with better ways. And that also falls into staging. Is to, should you cross your body? Should you keep your body like that? So that the intent is clear to the audience. So.
And then last but not least, appeal.
That's an interesting one because a lot of people have a very wrong conception of that they think the appeal of a drawing the appeal should be like it should be beautiful. It should be a beautiful princess, and she should be beautiful, and it should be very appealing. But a bad guy can be just as appealing, and so you want that bad guy to look great. You want to not like this guy. You want him to be drawn so well that he appeals to you in a bad way, like Ursula from Little Mermaid. My gosh. She comes off like the nice grandma, but in the end, she's this evil witch person, and she really has these bad intentions and stuff, and you see it, and it's the evilness of her drawing. It appeals to you, and they did some really clever things with her, by the way. When you first see, they play with shapes at Disney a lot, okay, and a lot of movies play with shapes, okay, so. For instance, round shapes are organic and soft and warm and inviting, and square shapes are industrial and not organic, and triangle shapes can be anywhere from nature to jagged teeth and stuff like that. So the people use shapeology to help describe their characters. So for instance, when you first see Ursula in The Little Mermaid, all of her tentacles are all wrapped in, so she's all very rounded and stuff, and all of her eyes and everything is very rounded face. But when she goes evil, watch what happens. All of her tentacles come out. They're all these spikes. You see spikes on her eyebrows. You see spikes on her elbows. All of a sudden, she's this spiky person. And that's because we know that, and we associate that with spike. We associate that with danger. And so it's this very clear transformation from, it's like she goes from being Big Hero 6, nice, round, and cuddly, to this evil, scary octopus thing with these sharp tentacles and stuff, and that happens, and that's the appeal of drawing. And a bad guy can have just as much appeal as a good person, but it can go even further. Like if you can create a wonderful environment that has a lot of appeal. Like for instance, I love looking at the backgrounds for How to Train Your Dragon movies, and even more recently, that Wild Robot movie. I could look at the backgrounds of that for hours. It's just beautiful to look at, but because it's so appealing. So, and that's the appeal. So,
like in Coraline, the other mother. And you clearly know when she sort of turns.
Yeah, and she's a little spiky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But still, there's like this sort of beautiful facade, but then
There's
eyes
still an
change.
appeal to it, yeah.
Yeah, the eyes get very strange.
And even though it's not beautiful, but still it's a scary, cool appeal.
Right,
Yeah.
right, because you want to know what's behind it,
Yeah.
Right. Why do audiences like puppets, but we're often scared of dolls or clowns?
That's a good question. But I wanted to touch one more thing
sure.
on the principles.
Oh, yeah, please, okay.
A lot of Disney animators have come up with a 13th principle.
Oh, okay.
And that is called settling. And what that is that it's kind of like if when you stop, you kind of overshoot something for a little bit, then you come back in. So like if I'm walking, I'll walk here, and then all of a sudden I'll stop, but I'll go into it, and then I'll come back a little bit. You just you overshoot a little bit. They're calling it settling, and I think that it actually is incorporating several of the other of the 12 principles, but they're kind of calling it right now as being kind of referred as the 13th principle, which is settling.
Settling, interesting. So it's sort of a combination, like ease in, ease out, timing, exaggeration.
It's kind of like the reverse of exaggeration, exactly. So, the reverse of anticipation. So like if I'm going to get out of this chair, I'll crouch down and I'll get up. But when I come to sit in this chair, I'll go down, and then for a little bit I'll be down, and I'll come back into this position. And I might overshoot this position back and then come back. So I might go like, there, I settled. And so that's one of the things that they're toying around with as well. So
it's the 13th, but it's not official.
Not official.
Oh, well,
yeah.
Okay, but That's nice. I like
yeah,
that.
it's kind of cool.
That is
Yeah.
cool. Why do audiences like puppets, but we're fearful of dolls or clowns in films?
That's a really good question. I think that I think just people can be creeped out. I don't know what the psychology is behind clowns scaring people. And they don't scare me, but I can definitely see how they could, especially after seeing the first Poltergeist movie with the clown doll. It's a clown and it's a doll, and it's scary. and yeah, so I'm not sure what the real psychology is there, but I think it's unsettling I think when you see people in clown makeup, it's hard to see what their intent and their emotions are because the clown makeup is masking it, and I think we've all had. I think the world is filled with negative clown stories and stuff, so I think that feeds on it. But I'm not really sure. The thing about puppets I find interesting is with young children and puppets. And it's not so much in making movies and stuff, but for 27 years I would build these big elaborate puppet shows and then have Kermit the Frog come out on the puppet show and give away the candy to the kids. And so I did everything. I did like the Pride Rock from the Lion King, and I did like haunted houses, and I did the Titanic and rocket ships and all these different things. And every year, Kermit the Frog, hey everybody, here's your candy. And I would make a little candy chute so that like instead of like giving them to the kids, they could put their bucket up to the chute and you would run the candy down the chute. And it was very popular. But what I noticed with little kids that are below like 7 and below, they all want to punch the puppet. It seems like there's some primitive dominance thing with young children where they feel like some of them feel like they must dominate. I don't know what it is. I don't know what the psychology is behind it, but that for 27 years I watched this happen every year with young children having this weird, irresistible thing to come up and punch a puppet.
So dolls and clowns, maybe it's just because they've been featured in so many movies that we just associate that.
Yeah, and maybe there's so many of those like old dolls that they really incorporate the uncanny valley experience. There's some dolls they look enough human, but they're not human that they're creepy. And especially like the old-fashioned dolls, some of those are super creepy looking because they are so well done and they have those beautiful glass eyes that are very realistic, but something's not right about them. They're still a doll, and that's unsettling. And it's called the uncanny valley. And it was first thought of by this a Japanese scientist, like in 1971. He noticed that as we try to make things more human looking, the more and more they get away from being human looking because we miss out on little things. Things like, for instance, the reason James Cameron decided he could do Avatar was after seeing Gollum on Lord of the Rings. And it was all because they had perfected the little water on the bottom of the eyes for the Gollum. And he said, okay, we can do that now. We can have realistic stuff. And that was kind of like that breakthrough to get past the uncanny valley. But when you do stuff like Gollum, who deliberately has big eyes, you look at him as a fantastical character, and that doesn't bother you because you know he's not a human, so the uncanny valley doesn't come into play. But with movies like The Polar Express, and you start watching the characters in The Polar Express, and you see how there's something wrong with the eyes. They're a little bit dead or something. That's the uncanny valley, and it makes you kind of creeped out because something's wrong. Something is trying to be human, but it's not.